Hello everybody and welcome to the Leading Edge Detailing Online Training Academy. In this tutorial we're going to be talking about the basics of paint correction and how you need to hold and manage the various polishing machines. This is going to give you fantastic insight. Doesn't matter if you are a beginner or a professional. I'm going to be giving you a lot of tips that I learned myself the hard way, especially about holding the machine in specific ways so you can be more comfortable, work efficiently, look after your pads, and of course not hurt yourself. Behind me is a fantastic BMW M330i, and it does have a coating on there at the moment. It belongs to a very good friend of mine, and because he washes his car almost on a weekly basis, it makes him a perfect candidate for me to put prototype coatings on there to get feedbacks. So it currently has IGL Elixir. I am going to be polishing that off, which doesn't need a lot of effort, but the concepts of how you hold the polishing machine and manage the pad is still the same. And then I'm going to be coating it with a prototype product that we obviously want to put through its paces before we release to the public. I'm also going to be sharing my thoughts on the Flex battery powered DA, which I am yet to use. And I'm also going to be using a combination of the Rupes machines. And also, like I mentioned, how to manage your posture and how to hold the machines properly. For the interest of giving a very natural tutorial, I'm also going to reduce the editing to a minimal. So please bear with me if I make a mistake, backtrack, a lot, sneeze, whatever it is. It is a natural training course and I want you to feel like as if I was there with you and you were here with me in the garage and we were doing it properly face to face. Now, the first thing I want to explain is with all polishing machines, and it doesn't matter if it is if it's wireless or battery powered or corded, whatever else it is, if you're using a DA, the way you hold the machine is critical. You're going to need to make sure that the pad is flat to the surface of the paintwork when you're polishing, because if you have it on a slight angle, that pad is going to stall. It might look like it's still rotating, but in reality, it's actually not moving because the throw is not doing anything. If you have it on the wrong angle as well, you're going to heat up your pad, you're going to damage your pad very quickly. And in extreme cases, if you're really mismanaging it, that throw, that side-to-side motion can damage the paintwork, especially if you're working on a door and you're passing by the side view mirror. If you go too close to that, you can have what's called a backing plate strike, and that's when the side-to-side motion actually hits the panel. And it's not going to hit it with the pad, it's going to hit it with the backing plate, which is not soft, and it's going to cause damage. So we're going to be focusing heavily on that. I'm also going to be giving you a little bit of advice on how you should hold the machine, and also how to not eat polish, which is something I see a lot of people do wrong. I did it myself very, very much so when I first started detailing. And that's a little bit of advice on how to work clean. Yes, you can clean up the car after you do your paint correction and try to get out all the polish from the gaps, but that's a waste of time. You're better off doing it clean from the start. You're going to work much more efficiently and you're going to save a lot of time later on, and prevention is better than cure. Always prevention is better than cure. So let's get stuck straight into it. Let's get the trusty milk crate as a seat. And we're going to probably jump onto the hood or bonnet if you're in Australia, and then do a door and maybe do like a few areas that are smaller with the smaller machines to demonstrate. A little bit of housekeeping before we get stuck into using the polishing machines. First of all, make sure your car is washed, decontaminated and completely dried, and you are working in a clean, dust-free environment. You should not be machine polishing outside. I have done it before. It is not ideal by any means. I know that if you are a mobile detailer, you're sometimes limited in what you can do, but stress to the customer that if you are working indoors or at least in a garage, the results are going to be far better. The second thing you need to make sure you do is center the pad correctly. Now, some machines like the Rupes machines have backing plates with a hole in the middle. That will help you center pads like this IGL 5-inch yellow that have a hole in the middle. It helps with the cooling and it helps you center it onto the backing plate. This Flex machine doesn't have a hole in the middle for me to use as a guideline, so you just have to kind of eyeball it, spin the machine around, spin the backing plate around, and try to make sure it's centered. If it is not centered, it's going to cause excessive vibrations. It will lead to premature pad failure, and you're not going to be polishing good enough. The next thing you want to do is make sure you have a trolley to put the machine on. I really dislike it when people put machines on the floor. I have done it myself here and there because I've been lazy or I'm polishing a sill. But you need to make sure that you don't put the machine on the floor, and if you have to put it on the floor, it needs to be pointing up. If it points sideways, you're going to pick up dirt and grime and little rocks and whatever else is on the floor onto your pad, and that's going to cause haze, as I discussed already in the defects video. Also use a brand new microfiber cloth and keep that cloth somewhere very clean. For me, it's next to me on the window. Don't throw it over your shoulder. Don't throw it on the floor. If you're going to be putting it on a trolley or a table, make sure that table is clean. Because what's going to happen is, if you are polishing and then you go to wipe with that dirty cloth that's picked up some sediment, you're going to be creating your own swirl marks and scratches, and then you're going to be chasing your tail thinking to yourself, what am I doing wrong? The car is not polishing up, where as a matter of fact, you're polishing properly, but you're scratching the paintwork yourself. And last but not least, and it sounds trivial, everybody does it. If you're using a machine that is corded, make sure that the cord is plugged in and the power point is switched on. Because lots of times you'll be doing this with a machine and thinking, why am I not starting? And you realize you haven't plugged it in or you haven't switched it on. So let's get stuck into the basics of how I believe you should prime your pad, how you start the polishing process, and the do's and don'ts of how you hold the machine. Whenever you're doing anything detailing related, or whenever you're working with any chemicals, no matter how safe you know they are, always wear nitrile gloves. It's just going to protect your skin just in case you're going to develop an allergic reaction one day. Better be safe than sorry. And how I prime the pads is, and please excuse this product here, I had some on my hand from opening the bottle. I don't believe that you should soak the whole pad up unless you're using a wool pad or a microfiber pad, and we'll get to that later on in the more intermediate lessons. But for the purpose of this initial lesson, what we're going to do is put on a 5-inch pad about 3 to 4 pea-sized drops around the circumference of the pad right here. So let's take this up a little bit closer to the camera so you can see. Here we go. That's all we're going to do. Now this is the part that every beginning detailer gets wrong, and that is that they spin the machine before putting it onto the car. So never, ever, ever do this, turn it on. You're going to get polish splattering everywhere. What you want to do now is dab these droplets onto the area that you're going to be working on. And again, don't be too worried that I'm not going to be showing you the actual process of, what size panel I'm going to be polishing. We're going to go through that in the more intermediate tutorials later on. For the moment, we're only covering the basics of how you hold the machine and the do's and don'ts. And this is the most important do's and don't, which is not getting polish everywhere. So make sure there are no blobs of polish on the panel. So that way, when you're going across it as you're polishing, you're not going to be splattering it everywhere and getting it into edges on your clothes and onto the windows, and especially plastic trims, which is very difficult to remove once it's on there. Put the machine onto the lowest setting and always turn the machine on and off while it's on the car. Don't pick it up and turn it off, because two things will happen. The first thing, which sure enough always happens, is polish will go everywhere. The next thing that always happens is if the Velcro on the backing plate is wearing out, that pad is going to go flying across the room. Seen it many times. Always happens with beginning detailers. So make sure your pad is flat. Now, the bonnet of this BMW is not completely flat. It does have a little bit of a concave nature to it. So what we're going to do is place it flat, very little pressure. You use your right hand. I'm right-handed in my case. The right hand is for the controlling the angles. The left hand I'm going to be using to, put a little bit of pressure if needed, or remove pressure if needed. And I'm also going to be using it to control the balance of the machine. So I'm not going to be trying to hold the machine up like this. I'm going to be trying to hold the machine like this, and this hand, because it has the leverage, it can do that. If you're left-handed, you can still do it the opposite way. And depending on which side of the car you're working on and the axis, you might still have to switch hands and arms. Don't polish straight on. You have very little access and control if you do this, and you're going to be using your whole body. You want to be polishing on a nice comfortable angle. I would probably say 45-degree angle. So your 90-degree angle is going across, your 180-degree angle is going straight. 45-degree angle from your body is something ideal, and you want to use the polisher before it dries. So let's fire it up, and I'm going to hopefully be able to talk while the machine is working, but if not, I'll still repeat myself and do a bit of a voice overlay. So all the polishing machines that I know of have two buttons. They have the trigger button, and well, I'm talking about 5-inch and 6-inch machines here. They have a trigger button, and then they also have a lock button. That lock button helps you squeeze the machine, squeeze the trigger, and press the lock button so the machine continues to spin without you having to squeeze the trigger on. Very important so you don't get tired with your hands, and also very important so you don't accidentally let go and put it back on. To release that mechanism, just give the trigger a quick squeeze. So we're going to squeeze, press the lock button, and now the machine is on. So as you can see, hopefully, the machine is spinning freely and we're on speed 1. Give it a quick move just to spread out that polish that we put on. And now take the machine up as you see comfortable and let it do its thing. Just let it do its thing. If you feel like the machine is spinning too quickly and it's too uncontrollable, slow it down. If you feel like it's not spinning fast enough, speed it up. Now, this machine, because it's battery powered, it has enough grunt, but nowhere near as much as a power corded repairs, from what I can see so far. So here the angle is not spinning. I don't know if that camera can see it. So you just have to play around with the angles until you get the angle you want. And we'll cover that in its own tutorial. So wear that polish in nicely. So see how I'm not actually doing anything with this hand? This hand is purely for support. And let the polish do its thing. Once you have passed the panel sufficiently to break down the polish, grab your microfiber cloth. Let's put the machine down on the trolley. Grab your microfiber cloth. Make sure you don't put your hand onto the stitching of the cloth, and don't scrunch it up. And what you want to do is build up momentum and wipe it off quickly. That's the best trick on wiping off polish nice and neat and quick. And put that microfiber cloth back where it needs to go. Make sure you get all the polish you used off, because if you don't do that, you're very likely going to struggle to take it off later because it's going to dry and harden up. So let's do a little bit of a recap. Holding the machine in the right posture is the most important thing. Using the right speed is very important. Pad and polish combination, which I have already covered in earlier tutorials, and we're going to dive much more into that as we have other examples of vehicles that we're going to be using. For this car, I am doing a very quick polish to remove existing ceramic paint protection. So we don't necessarily need to check for swirl marks. It doesn't have swirl marks. I only recently did it and I've checked. So I'm only going with a medium pad, which is an IGL yellow, and IGL F3, which is a fine polish. As part of taking care and I guess basics of paint correction, a lot of people polish like what they see on hand car wash cafes and stuff, and that's how you manage a rotary machine, where with a DA it doesn't make any heat. This panel is completely cool, so you don't have to speed up really fast and do the work very quickly. Let the polish and the pad do its job, especially on this machine, which so far to me feels underpowered. I'm sure it will do the job, but it's nowhere near as strong as a 6-inch repairs, for example, which feels like you're just hacking through whatever you're working on, spinning at mega RPM. This machine feels a little bit underpowered, so you have to give it more time. So now let's do this part here. Again, what we're going to do is grab our polish, do a few good sized drops, dab those drops, and it's always good to use the body lines of the car to know where you have been and where you need to go. So I know that I'm working kind of in line with this section right here. It's good to know where you've been so you don't waste a lot of time. And again, we're going to squeeze the trigger button, press the lock button, let the machine do its thing. And you have to play around with your angles to make sure that you're getting the machine to spin properly and accurately. Now you can hear me putting my hand down, giving it a little bit more pressure. Hearing is very important when you're doing paint correction. You're going to be able to hear the pad overheat. You're going to be able to hear the pad go on a wrong angle. You're also going to be able to hear any problems. So, hear this, you know that you're doing it wrong. Too much angle, that pad will not survive. So you need to make sure that the pad has a consistent spin. So focus on that spin. If you need to put a black marker on your backing plate, you can, to make sure that you're getting that consistent spin. And you need to make sure, there we go, you need to make sure that the pad is flat or as flat as possible to the paintwork. If you have a concave surface like this, you need to really split it into two halves. This is one half right here. Hopefully we got that on camera. This is the other half. If you try to put it in the middle, it's not going to spin. See, now it's spinning, spinning, not spinning. And let the polish do its job. You're not going to be overheating that panel. This panel is completely cold. So don't do this. I've seen it. It's only in movies, rotary machines, and high-end car wash cafes. Don't go over the edges either, because if you go over the edges, that's how you put polish in those edges. And when you see that the polish has become almost transparent, that's when you wipe it off. But again, the trick for this tutorial is all about managing the angle of the machine and being comfortable with the machine. The main thing to do is be comfortable. As you see, I'm not at all stressing and being uncomfortable. I'm talking while I'm working, and I'm wiping everything off gently and easily. So you don't want to be in a position where you're so rigid and you're using your whole body. You know, let's switch the side. You don't want to be polishing like this and moving your whole body. You want to easily and comfortably, with good posture, use that polishing machine. That's the main thing about it. You want to be comfortable. When you are trying to reach further areas away, whether they're further in front of you or to the side, you have to remember that our body works as an arc. So as you are traveling, let's say, how do we show this? Probably this way is the best way to do it. To be flat on a surface like this, you need to go like that. But if you're holding the machine rigid, and you're trying to go sideways, you're creating an arc. And that arc, like this, it's not going to work because you're going to be changing the angle of the pad. So you need to be relaxed, you need to pay attention to the spin of the pad, and you just need to let it do its thing. Just let it do its thing. If you're very rigid, as you're reaching out, you're going to be pushing that pad up. And when you push it up, or especially if you're working on a door, for example, as you go further out, you're going to be creating an arc. And when you do that arc, the angle of the pad is not going to be ideal, and it's not going to spin. You're going to have issues. Always remember to continuously clean your pad, as I have explained in the pad cleaning and maintenance tutorial. Very important to do that. But for, like I said, this tutorial, the most important thing I want you to focus on is using the right amount of polish. If you use too much polish, it makes it harder for you to wipe off, and it's probably not going to work as good. And also the angle and the speed. If you use speed that is too high, that pad is going to start wobbling and overheating. If you use speed too low, it's not going to spin properly. So I'm going to time lapse this, do this bonnet here very quickly, and then we're going to jump on a door and demonstrate on a door, and probably switch over to a different machine as well halfway through. Maybe we'll put the 6-inch machine on so we can have a look at how that feels. So let's jump onto this very quickly. I'm sure we have spoken about this before as well in other tutorials, but it is very good housekeeping to always make sure you mask up any rubbers or any plastic trims. If they are glossy trims, if they're gloss black trims, you can get away without masking them, especially if you're only doing a fine polish. You're probably going to be giving them a bit of a polish anyway. But these rubbers around sunroofs, and normally we're talking about pillars, they need to be masked up so you don't have to get cleaning after, because if you polish them, sometimes you can permanently damage them. So just good housekeeping practices. Grab yourself some good quality masking tape, run it neatly along the perimeter. And something I have seen a lot of new detailers do, especially people I train, they put the masking tape, but then they go over the masking tape and still damage the trim. Be mindful that you're putting that tape on there to protect whatever it is you're taping. So if you have a very big plastic bumper that is just raw plastic, unpainted, be mindful that you're putting that tape there so you don't touch it. Or if it's a side skirt, don't put the tape on there and cover an inch of trim only to go over that inch and damage 5 centimeters or 2 inches if you're in America. So be mindful of that. Always mask up first, and at the end of the day, take that masking tape off. Cars like Nissan GTRs, for example, hate the glue in the tape, and if you take the tape off too late, you're going to leave permanent marks on there from the solvents and the glue that's in that tape. So once you're done with the polishing, take all the tape off. Even if you have to go back the next day and tape it again, it is better to waste a few dollars off tape than have to explain to a customer why their incredibly rare R34 GTR plastic trims are damaged and you can't even buy them to replace them, let alone the price of how much it's going to be. So now let's do the roof, do the boot, and then jump onto the doors and compare the flex to the repairs. We'll probably throw on the 6-inch as well. In an earlier tutorial, I mentioned that you have to be careful with the DA because of the throw. And if you go too close to an edge or too close to another panel, you might either damage that panel or you might damage the pad, or you might not even just be polishing efficiently. So this is a great example of what I'm talking about. So we have a flat surface here, which is the boot lid, but then you have this wing. Now the wing itself is gloss black, so I'm not too worried about a little bit of polish getting onto it. It's probably a lot softer than the factory paint of BMW. So you still have to worry if you're using something like a wool pad or a microfiber disc or any really heavy cutting compound. But we have a medium pad in our gel F3, so I'm not worried about that. But what we do need to be worried about is the throw. So as the machine is oscillating, you don't want to be hard up against this wing, because as the machine works, it's going to be continuously hitting the wing, and you might even break it off or damage. You'll definitely damage your pad or backing plate, but you might even break the wing or damage it. So what we want to do is keep the distance of the throw away from whatever panel you want to avoid. So this is a 15mm throw machine, so I want to make sure that visually I am 15mm away from the edge of the wing at all times, and you'll actually see the pad on there, and you might even see the pad touching the wing, but at least if it touches it, it's not giving it the full force, it's just touching it lightly. So what I'm going to do is bring the camera closer so you can see what I'm talking about. We're going to turn the machine on and I'll show you how I'm going to polish up this boot lid. Like I mentioned before, we want to dab all of the polish around evenly. We don't want to have blobs like this, because as the polishing machine hits it, it's just going to splatter it everywhere and scatter it around. So we want to dab all of this. And as I mentioned before, we're going to have many other tutorials about paint correction. So don't be too worried about the speed and the pressure and the paint hardness and softness. This is not the purpose of this specific tutorial. This is just how to hold the machine and the do's and don'ts. So that way you can get practicing on a spare panel or a beaten up car or something. So dab it really nicely like this. Get that machine ready. Always turn the machine onto the paint. Don't turn it up, don't turn it on here. You're going to get polish everywhere. Turn it onto the paint. And let it do its thing. Don't do this. Just let it do its thing with a little bit of pressure. And as you can see, I'm not jamming it against the paint, the wing. I'm just keeping a nice healthy distance away. You should be able to put your finger there. I hope this demonstrated that I actually didn't go right against the panel. I let the machine oscillate close to it, and you can see it's almost really there. But this is why, going back to what I mentioned in yesterday's tutorial, where are we? Right here. This is what I mentioned in the earlier tutorial about the different types of machines, that you want to use the 3" or the 1" for your edge work. For areas where you couldn't really come across to this, you want to have a machine that has a smaller throw. So I have a little air-powered machine that only has a 3mm throw, which is amazing, but you can use the little Rupes iBread on a rotary function, and just be very mindful of the wing itself, because you'll burn through that paint quick. Just go very quickly against it, or otherwise get the 3" with the 12mm throw and go really nice and close against that with a smaller pad, and you'll get a lot more defects out than you would with a 5-inch, especially a 6-inch 21 repairs. So wipe it off quickly. Do the other half of the boot lid. And we have done the horizontal panels of this car. And let's see if we can capture this on camera. Let's see if the microphone is sensitive enough. So I'd like to demonstrate what I mean by sometimes you definitely need a 3-inch machine instead of a 5 or a 6, and I guess the limitation of this particular 5-inch. Now with a repairs 5-inch or a wired 5-inch, repairs 15, I could get a decent result doing this and it's not going to stall. And the reason is you have this curve here. So when you have a curve here, really the best way to handle it is you have a pad here and a pad here. You can't just put it in the middle because otherwise, as you can see, there's a big enough gap for me to put my finger through. It's not going to spin. So you need to ideally handle it like this and handle it like that. This flex machine is struggling with these parts, so let's give it a try. I'm actually surprised that it did it so well. I was expecting it to stall more, so it does definitely have torque. It just doesn't spin fast, but it definitely has torque. And I don't know if you could see it on camera, it started spitting out these little balls, and that's a good indication that you need to blow your pad out, which you can also see. So if your polish starts flicking out lumps or balls, it's rolling the polish and flicking it. It's time to blow out your pad, and I'll try to zoom in on here and show you how that looks like. All right, so with the vast majority of the car all polished up with the Flex 5-inch, we're now at the pointy end of town. So what I'm going to do is show you how I'm going to address the front fender using the 3-inch polisher only. Then what we're going to do is switch the backing plate of the Flex to a 6-inch and compare the Flex to the repairs, both with 6-inch pads. And then we're going to do the edges and the tighter areas with the 3-inch machine on the passenger door, which is, if you're in America, that is the driver door. One thing I do want to highlight to you straight away, and like I said, the purpose of this tutorial is to get you comfortable enough to pick up your polishing machine and go out and give it a try. It's not going to teach you how to paint correct, but hopefully it'll teach you to work clean, not messy, and not damage your pad, machine, or harm the car. You're going to feel more comfortable with smaller throw machines because there is less vibration. Normally, I find new detailers gravitate automatically to the 3-inch polisher, and they just want to use it because it's very nice and light and easy to work with, which it is. Don't get yourself stuck into the habit of trying to polish the whole car with a 3-inch machine. You can dig a massive hole with a spoon if you're going to be digging it for a few years, but you can use a shovel or you can use a digger, and that'll speed things up. So use the appropriate size machine for the appropriate size task. Let's throw on a 3-inch IGL pad on the 3-inch repairs and get onto the fender here. Now, what I do want to also mention is that the polishing process is normally the same process as you follow when you wash the car. So you always start from the cleanest parts to the dirtiest parts. we're going to be assuming that the car is perfectly clean and washed and decontaminated and dried, but still, you don't want to go and do the side skirts first and then go straight onto the bonnet. You want to do the cleanest areas first to reduce the chance of debris getting into your pad. And it's no different with addressing the fender here. What we're going to do is work on the top parts first, then we're going to work down. And every time you do a panel or a part, you want to actually check the pad and blow it out because you don't want any debris potentially getting in there, especially if you go over an edge. So let's do this. Let's set up a couple of cameras, and it's going to be fairly straightforward. When you're working around badges, be careful again from that throw of the machine. This is something you're going to find out when you're doing paint correction, and is that it's a lot of repetition. It's a lot of repetitive work. It's going to be no different doing one car from another car or one panel from another panel. Once you figure out that pad and polish combination, as we discussed in the earlier tutorials about paint types and polishing types and pad types and all that stuff that we've already covered, once you figure out that combination you're working with, it is pretty much a matter of just polishing away and keeping an eye out on the rotation of the pad and machine. Make sure it's spinning, make sure you're not hitting anything, make sure you're not destroying pads. There are going to be times where you're going to have to destroy your pads, for example on side skirts and bumpers and things like that. Unfortunately, if you don't have a pad small enough, you might just have to use a 3-inch and sacrifice it to the greater, gods of automotive polishing perfection. So let's get stuck straight into this thing. The way to turn the 3-inch repairs on is different to the other bigger machines. So I don't know about Flex and other brands, but with the repairs, it doesn't have a trigger that you squeeze and then a button to lock. It pretty much has this switch here. So I'm not going to run it for too long because it'll probably fly off the backing plate, but you pretty much flick it up, it's on, and you flick it down and it's off, which, because of that motion where it doesn't have that trigger, a lot of people, a lot of beginner detailers tend to turn the machine on before they put it onto the paint and lift it up before it stops spinning, and then the pad just goes flying away. So make sure that you turn it on the car and you turn it off on the car as well. Another thing to mention is these machines spin very fast. So it goes up all the way to speed setting 6. I normally run it at speed 1. Very rarely have I had the need to run it beyond speed 1. So if I was you, start off with speed 1. And like I mentioned before, work nice and neat. It is a smaller pad. You don't need a lot of polish. Just put 3 size drops on there. Come on. 1, 2, the bottle's running out. 3. Even more important to dab it on. And this machine can be used one-handed, or you can use it 2 hands. Normally, I wouldn't be sitting in this position because obviously I have the camera recording. I would like to sit in front of the panel I'm working on where I'm kind of outstretched so you can see what I'm doing. But we'll give it a try anyway. And this is a corded machine, so always make sure the cord is away from the car. Don't let it hang on the car and then the cord will scratch it. So throw it over your shoulder if you have to, or just keep it over your leg or on the side when you're working on the side of the car. Speed setting 1, keep the polishing machine on the car, click it on. It is literally as simple as that. The 3-inch machine is the easiest to use. It's very comfortable, very light, very smooth, very little vibration. don't get sucked into trying to polish the whole car with it. But something I do wish to highlight, and we're going to talk about it much more in the more advanced tutorials, but while I'm here, is don't focus heavily on an edge. So let's say we have an edge here. Don't just keep polishing that edge, because what happens is the weight of the machine is going to be concentrated on a very small area. Like let's say this body line here, you want to polish it from one side and then from another side. Don't go straight on top and don't stay there for too long, because what will happen is all that force of the machine spinning and the weight is going to be concentrated in a very small area. You're going to get higher pressure. Higher pressure means more cutting. More cutting means you'll likely go through the paint. So when you're crossing a body line, go over it quickly, or otherwise do it in almost two aspects. Go from one side, go from another side. Don't just put the machine straight on top. If you do have to go on top, very quick pass and blaze over it, because you're not going to really have swirl marks right on an edge. You might have big scuff marks, but not a swirl mark. So what I'll do is I'll wipe this part down and set up the time lapse a little bit and just go through this guard very quickly. There's not much more I can tell you about the 3-inch polishing machine, other than, again, keeping an eye out on the spin, making sure the machine oscillates properly, it doesn't stall. You could see here that I've put, for my own use and that of my staff and people that I have trained, a black Sharpie line on the backing plate, which is white, so that way you can see it spinning and you know when it's stalled. I suggest you do that for your machine as well. And just get comfortable. Use your left hand, use your right hand, use both hands. Don't squeeze hard. The harder you squeeze, the softer the pad will get, the faster it will disintegrate. Heat is your enemy in 90% of cases. Unless you're doing some mega heavy cutting, you don't want any heat. So let's get stuck into it. So no different, wired or unwired. We're going to be dabbing that polish on so we don't get polish flying everywhere. Door is almost done. All we have to do is go back with a 3-inch, do the tighter areas. Now, when you get to an area like this, as I was mentioning, you have to be careful with pad strike. If you can't fold the mirror electronically or manually, you might actually be better off trying to put in a bigger pad in there, because you can get the machine here and the pad might still reach inside, as opposed to trying to put a 3-inch machine in here, which you're not going to be able to fit underneath the mirror. So do play around when you do get to these areas. Just make sure you don't hit the bottom of the mirror with the backing plate as it moves. And the bottom areas are probably easier if you open up the door, so that way you don't hit the side skirt. So those are my tips for you when you're doing these kind of areas. And I'll probably just demonstrate it in a second. But that's pretty much the basics of paint correction. Just get comfortable, make sure you get that pad moving right. There's always going to be a way for you to hold it and keep it spinning, but be mindful of the noise. If you hear it making an odd noise, like a wobbling noise, you're probably holding it wrong, too much pressure or a wrong angle. And just keep it spinning, just keep it spinning. That's the main thing to do. So we'll throw on the 3-inch, and that's pretty much your paint correction 101. You are ready to start playing around with your own car, and you now have the knowledge of what to do and what not to do. And as you can see, and I'll do a few close-ups and pan shots, I have not rinsed the car, I have not blown the dust off the car, I haven't wiped it off the car. This is pretty much all the mess we made today in polishing up this BMW. There is no polish in any gaps, there's no polish on any trims, it's a very clean job. You can pretty much blow the dust off, wipe it down, do a IGL pre-coat and put on some IGL Elixir or IGL Kenzo or whatever you like on it. You don't have to go out and rinse it. Where if you work dirty, you're going to very likely create more headache for yourself in the way of cleaning edges and polish out of different door jambs and boot jambs and hood jambs and whatnot. So let's do the 3-inch parts quickly. And as far as this tutorial goes, you're pretty much know more than 90% of beginning detailers, and these basics are actually the things that get people off guard when they begin detailing. And even very experienced people that are not as skilled, they'll deliver a car and it's got polish everywhere. So these are the foundations for you to do everything else on. And they're very good foundations. If you can nail them now, you're going to be a fantastic detailer with paint correction. Sometimes you just have to get down and dirty to do those lower areas. And as I mentioned, you could either do it on the car or you can open up that door a little bit. You don't have to put too much polish. This pad's almost ready to be blown out. So let's dab here. And you know what, for the sake of demonstrating, let's also do the side skirt at it. So treat it as 2 separate areas. You're not going to be able to polish this without the 1-inch machine or the air-driven little polisher that I have, but you can definitely do this part, and it's going to be a little bit fiddly because it does have quite a curve in there. And when you're dealing with these curves, we're going to cover this in much more detail in a more advanced tutorial. Instead of trying to push the pad in, we're going to give it a little bit of an angle. So let's go. Here we are, quick machine polish, all nice and done. As you can see in the photos, there isn't any polish that you have to really scrub off or clean off. All the trims are beautiful, all the door jambs and the gaps and the little crevices are polish free, which is the main thing. There is a little bit of dust. You can either rinse that off easily or you can blow it off with a compressed air or a little brush. My personal preference is to rinse the car well, because you're going to get a lot of polish around where the windows are that you're not really going to get off with compressed air, even if you blow it in there pretty strong. And I prefer not to use a brush if I don't have to, because you don't want to scratch those gloss black trims that are surrounding the window. But if you're on a tight time limit, it is what it is. Just blow the dust out and clean it up as good as you can with a microfiber cloth and a brush. But otherwise, this is Paint Correction 101. These are the basics of how you hold your machine, what to do and what not to do. Most importantly, if I am going to give you a little bit of advice, it's to be very mindful of the machine spinning. You can easily stall a DA as opposed to a forced rotation or a rotary machine, as I mentioned in the tutorial about the machines. But DAs are incredibly safe, incredibly versatile. Feel free to go over that panel as many times as you have to. Be mindful not to use too much product, as a lot of people do. Slow your hand movements down to give the machine and the pad and the polish time to do their job. And wipe off nice and clean and quick. The longer you leave that polish on the car, the harder it is going to be for you to remove. So remember, if you spill any polish on the car, if you flick some up, especially on plastic trim, wipe it off straight away. Keep your microfiber clean, keep your pad clean. Blow your pad out and clean them as soon as you can, or as often as you need to. Once the job is finished, like what I have now, wash these pads, wash them up, put them face down to dry up, so that way you don't damage the glue for the Velcro. And you're pretty much ready to get started into paint correction. From this point on, our tutorials are going to become more advanced. We're going to be talking about how to handle tight areas, how to handle complex shapes, how to handle solid paint without a clear coat, super soft paint, super hard paint, combinations and, supplemental wetting methods and all that. But what you have learned today is pretty much the core foundation for everything else to go on. If you're not going to work clean, if you're not going to hold your machine right, if you're not going to put the machine away in the right place, if you're not going to use a clean microfiber cloth, if you're not going to turn the machine on and off the car properly, everything else after this point is going to be a waste of time. So practice what I'm teaching you now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing, and I look forward to presenting future tutorials for you.